Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Yoiner Mosquera wash processed Colombia from Frukt Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Frukt, based out of Turku, Finland. And they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel on numerous occasions, though this is our first time featuring them since they changed their bag design. And if I'm being completely honest, I did prefer the old bag design, as that was some of my favorite packaging out of any coffee roaster in the entire world for its very simplistic look. I don't like really big lettering on this bag, otherwise I do think the design itself is fine. But Frukt's a coffee roaster that I do enjoy revisiting any opportunity I get, as I've been a big fan of the profile of their coffees in the past. So anytime I see them, I do want to purchase them and try out their coffees. So definitely looking forward to discussing this one, as this right here is day 44. And recipe for this coffee was our standard recipe, a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit, and like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this coffee, so this one is one of their filter roasts, and Frukt is a very light roasting coffee roaster, as I did find this one to be on the very light side of the spectrum, and I would say very close to that Nordic light in terms of that roast profile. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 19, first impression, and we did opt for the V60, and it was definitely a little bit more delicate off brew, as it came out somewhat more subtle Kenyan-like, with a little bit of acidity and some subtle berry aspects, but it really opened up as it cooled down with a surprisingly high level of candied sweetness and notably more intensity. A slight Kenyan-like feel with a huge level of sweetness, lending itself to a surprisingly nice start. And the reason that's so surprising for me is for anybody that's either seen some of our past Frukt reviews or even our Cafe Box Advent Calendar Blind Taste Test series, I don't always have the best first impressions with their coffees. Even at one time, the first coffee that we had ever reviewed from them, I went through, fully reviewed the coffee and revisited the coffee about a month later and was just really impressed by that coffee. That seems to be what happens with Frukt coffees. They don't necessarily lend themselves towards the best first impression, but the more and more I drink them, the more and more I enjoy them. This one, on the other hand, was really impressive right off the bat, so I said, okay, this could potentially be my favorite Frukt coffee that I've ever had. Day 22, opted for the Chemex, and it was still very nice, as it's offering a variety of things, including the brightness, clarity, and sweetness with a slightly tart and sweet red berry, and a little bit more of a lime-like attribute as well. Slightly candied yet again, so another great day. So far, just very consistent on those first two notes. We continue on to day 25 as we opted for the April brewer, and it continues to remain above expectations with a nice level of candied sweetness and clarity. It's also been pretty consistent to this point, as it's offering a focus on the softer red berry aspects, lending itself to another very nice cup of coffee. Day 28 through the V60 with Frukt's recipe, and I did find a recipe from them from back in 2019, and the recipe is very similar to ours. It's a 15.88 to 1. I believe it's 17 in, 270 water, and it's brewed at 93 to 95 degrees, so lower temperatures as well. Not too dissimilar to what we use, but this adjustment does lend itself towards more consistency as well. I didn't necessarily enjoy it as much, mostly because there wasn't quite as much sweetness. Kenyan-like without the savory aspects to it, and a little bit more citric qualities, a little bit more lime-like. So the trade-off was a slight bit less sweetness and a slight bit more citrus, but it was still a very nice cup of coffee and still very much in line with our previous experiences with this coffee. Day 31 through the Chemex with Frukt's recipe, and there's more consistency as it continues to offer that candied red fruit sweetness yet again. There's a slight honeyed aspect to it and an abundance of citrus, even a slight caramelized sweetness too. A slight bit of savoriness and herbality in a red floral sense, so definitely picking up an abundance of themes within this one, especially in terms of that red profile to it. Day 34 through the V60, and went the other direction by pushing the coffee a bit more. I said, why don't we try this out? Why don't we go a little bit more fine on the grind, and why don't we really ramp up the temperatures? And this left some mixed results, as this time it was a fair bit more savory than any of the previous days that we had had. A similar cup outside of that, as there's plenty of candied red fruit, a lingering citric lime aspect in the finish. So it just offered more of the brighter aspects and more of the citric aspects that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of, though I know some people are probably looking for that in this coffee. day 37 through the Chemex with our standard recipe, and there continues to remain consistency outside of the strong adjustments we had made, as it offers plenty of the red berry characteristics and brightness at the forefront before settling into that lime-like citrus. Candied sweetness yet again, very straightforward. And on day 40, back through the V60 with our standard recipe, and this is the best I'd experienced of this coffee. Here on this day, it's definitely the best I'd experienced of this coffee, which is saying something considering it already left itself a positive first impression. And I think it was just building on that incrementally ever so slightly, where in the past I've noticed these coffees just improving tremendously over time. I feel like this one's starting out so good and ending on a pretty similar note, just a little bit of increase in the overall enjoyment of this one, as it's very reminiscent of Kenyan coffees without the savoriness, plenty of bright citrus, red berries, red florality, and that nice candied sweetness. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel. You can see what we're getting. And we have quite a few level 4s. This is a very clean looking tasting wheel, so let's go through it, beginning with the cleanliness level 4. So this one definitely offered a very clean coffee, as it was reminiscent of a Kenyan coffee without any of the savory tomato-like aspects, as there was an abundance of the red berry as well as red floral characteristics, giving this a very red themed cup of coffee. So I feel like level 4 is a great place to put it, and it did even offer a fair bit more clarity than I might have expected going into it. Very clean cup of coffee. Let's move on to the finish, level 4. Once again, we're going to focus on that red theme to this one because it definitely left a fair bit of the lasting red characteristics to it, especially in that floral and berried sense. In addition to that, that candied sweetness, so an abundance of really enjoyable aspects within the finish itself. Sweetness, level 4. And I can't recall whether or not I've scored Frukt coffees very high in terms of sweetness in the past. I don't think I have, because I think that's been one of the sticking points for me with their coffees. That's not an issue in this one, as this one was one of the sweeter coffees that I've ever had from them, and given that it felt candied right from the start and it remained very consistent in terms of the sweetness, I was very happy to see that scoring at that level 4 mark. Acidity, level 4. And I mentioned that right at the start there was a fair bit of brightness. I can't quite recall what the notes they have listed on here is, but I do think that they have something along the lines of citrus, and I can definitely feel a fair bit of that brightness within this coffee throughout. So level 4 felt like a great place to put it. Florality, level 4. And again, I don't know if they have any sort of floral note listed on here, but we had a very red themed cup of coffee, especially with some slight herbal-like qualities to it as well. So I could definitely see a fair bit of the like hibiscus, rosehip aspects to this one. Level 4, definitely the best place to put it. Berry fruit, level 4. That I do remember. I do know that they have red berries on here, and I could definitely feel that right from the start. As if you would have served me this and said it was a Kenyan coffee, I probably would have believed you. I probably just would have said that it's a Kenyan coffee that's lacking any of the savory aspects to it. Berry fruit was definitely one of those more pronounced characteristics, as well as the citrus that was maybe a little bit more present within the finish, though it was an ever-present aspect within this one as well, as so many of these notes are very consistent. I mentioned that on one day the citrus as well as the brightness could have been bumped up when I really pushed this coffee, but outside of that, I think that the level 4 is the best place to put it. Let's move on. We have a couple of level 3s. We will start with the caramel level 3, and that completely insinuates the candied sweetness to it. So I did mention on one day there was an ever so slight caramelized aspect to it, but I don't think it was ever as pronounced enough to score at that level 3 mark. I think that that's just more alluding to the candied aspects of this coffee. Body level 3. Surprisingly, a fair bit of body. Maybe that's not too surprising, but I was definitely experiencing a fair bit of that, as it was a little bit more medium to slightly more than medium bodied cup of coffee. And as I'm taking a very quick glance through the rest of this tasting wheel, there's nothing else really worth discussing. Maybe the savoriness, and that could have just been because it was very Kenyan-like, but I think it was a little bit more in that floral sense. Outside of that, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I really enjoyed this one because I've said in the past that I really enjoy Kenyan coffees that don't have the savory tomato-like aspect, and that's what this coffee felt like to me right from the start. Was a very clean and sweeter than expected Kenyan-like coffee without the tomato-like aspects, and for that reason it is one of my favorite Frukt coffees that I've ever had from them. So massive credit to them on this one. I think it was a very nice coffee right from start to finish. I really enjoy the profile of it. This sort of roast profile, this lighter roast profile, is the type of profile that I enjoy with the majority of my coffees. So massive credit to them on this one. I think they did a very nice job. I don't think it's going to be my favorite wash process Colombian coffee the entire year, but I do think given what it is, it's just a very nice cup of coffee in general. type of person I would suggest this coffee to. If you're like me, you prefer your Kenyan-like coffees to be without the savory aspect to them and you prefer them in a lighter profile, then I feel like this is an ideal fit for you because it has all of the things that you're looking for within those coffees. So really nice clarity, really nice sweetness, really nice florality, and really nice berry aspects, as well as the citric components, all within that more red-toned theme to it, while still offering a fair bit of a well-defined, well-structured citric aspect to it, giving this coffee just a very straightforward feel and profile to it right from start to finish. So given how simple this review was, I think that's kind of the best way I can leave it as well. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Yoiner Mosquera, wash processed Colombia from Frukt coffee roasters. Thank you for watching.